Walters is the best spot in Navy Yard to watch all Commanders and NFL games. Walters has over 30 TVs both inside and out. They're here to accommodate the largest amount of people possible.
We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
Here's the 1-2 pitch from Buehler. Got him swinging! That's it! It's a World Series win for LA! They've done it! They finished the job and give Los Angeles the parade it's been waiting for! A swarm of Dodgers on the right side of the infield. Grown men but children again, living out their dream.
And welcome to Nats Chat, along with MASNsports.com Nationals insider Mark Zuckerman. I'm Al Galdi, host of the Al Galdi podcast, and it is nice to be with you for the first installment of the podcast in MLB's 2024-2025 offseason. What could be a very eventful offseason for the Nationals, though we do emphasize that word could. MLB's 2024 season, of course, ended this past Wednesday night. The Los Angeles Dodgers won at the New York Yankees 7-6 on Wednesday night to win the World Series 4-1. And so now MLB free agency is getting going. Now, officially, players become free agents the day after the conclusion of the World Series, but those players cannot sign with new teams until 5 p.m. Eastern, 5 days after the conclusion of the World Series. The Nats do not have many notable free agents this offseason. The notable free agents would be starting pitchers Patrick Corbin and Trevor Williams and reliever Jacob Barnes. A first baseman / outfielder Joey Gallo has a mutual option for the 2025 season. It is widely expected he'll become a free agent. And of course, lurking above everything this MLB offseason is the free agency of a certain ex-National Yankees outfielder Juan Soto. Mark, it is good to see you. Seeing you in person at the third annual Nats Chat podcast party at Walters on October 4th. We want to thank everyone for coming out to that. That was a great success. A lot of fun talking with everyone. And did you like the fact that the 2024 World Series ended 5 years to the day of the 2019 World Series? And each World Series championship team here, Dodgers this season, Nats 2019, had reliever Daniel Hudson, and he, off the Dodgers winning this year's World Series, announced his retirement. Nice bit of symmetry here from a Nationals perspective.
We were just missing one last little bit, Al, which was for him to actually close out that game. And he was warming up at one point. And I don't know if anybody figured out what Dave Roberts' plan was. Obviously, he went with Walker Buehler in sort of the surprise relief appearance by the starter to pitch the ninth. If they had scored a few more runs, maybe it would have been Hudson. I know he struggled the night before, gave up that grand slam that was, it looked like a killer at the time for them. So I was very closely watching that and thinking, man, how amazing would this be if Daniel Hudson closes out the World Series on the 5th anniversary, almost to the minute it would have been. I think this one ended a couple minutes later than the one in 2019 did. But good for him. What a great career he had. And I don't know if people appreciate how much he overcame physically. 2 Tommy John surgeries. That was earlier in his career. But after he went to the Dodgers, he tore his ACL and missed a whole year. And at that stage, I think he was 35, 36. There was no reason that he had to come back from that. He really wanted to. He came back. He pitched in like 50 games this year. Obviously was part of what turned out to be a great Dodger bullpen and goes out as a 2-time champion. And so congrats to him. That was outstanding. You know, October's maybe my favorite month of the year for a variety of reasons. Great weather, great sports. Got to do the podcast party. That was great. I loved watching this World Series. I wish it went a few games longer because I was hoping it would go the full 7. But I was saying to Tim before we started recording, I kind of got that itch again now. It's been 5 years. I'm kind of ready to cover a playoff series again in DC. There's a long way to go between now and October of 2025, and who knows how it's going to play out. But I think for the first time in several years, since probably entering 2021, we can at least entertain the notion of that being possible, of the Nationals playing in October of 2025. And these next few months are going to go a long way towards telling us just how realistic that possibility is.
Absolutely. This sets up to be potentially the Nationals' biggest offseason since at least 2018, maybe even beyond that. It's a funny deal. Patrick Corbin's contract now is done. That remains the last significant external free agent signing by the Nats, and you've got to go back to December 2018 for when that happened. Imagine telling your December 2018 self everything that would happen with the Nationals from then until now. You'd have to say, hey, sit down. This is going to take a while, and it's going to take some explaining. But yeah, not since the Corbin contract of December 2018 have the Nats been true players in free agency. The question that is out there, maybe more than any other question from a Nationals perspective, is will the Nats be significant players in free agency this offseason? We talked about that as the Nats 2024 season went on. We, of course, do not have a definitive answer to that. We may not get a definitive answer to that for many, many months. As I mentioned, MLB free agency technically has begun. As we all know, MLB free agency is slow to evolve. So just because it has started doesn't mean that anything of real consequence is going to be happening here. But is your sense that we could, and again, I'll emphasize that word could, be on the verge here of the Nats making some major moves in an offseason for the first time in a long time?
I think it's possible, yeah. We still don't really have that definitive, clear answer from the front office. And I don't know that we will get a formal declaration from anyone as if to say, yes, we are all in on free agency this year. I think the proof is going to be in the results and whenever they do or do not sign somebody of consequence. I think you're going to hear their name out there more than we have, certainly in several years, as at least a potential landing place for some prominent guys, starting with Soto, but including others. We're going to be talking about first baseman. We're going to be talking about starting pitchers, some DH types, probably some relievers. So I think their name is going to be out there, but, it boils down to, do they actually get the job done? And it's one thing to say, yeah, we're interested in this guy. We're going to make an offer to this guy. But let's say you don't land whoever that player is. Are you then committed to signing somebody else, whoever's next on the list? Or is it kind of like we'll go after Soto, but if he doesn't come back here, we're not going after anybody else of that caliber or anywhere near that caliber? I think that's really the unanswered question here. But I do expect them to be more active than they have been in quite a while. I think it's pretty clear as they ended this past season what they believe they have and what they know they still need as they move forward. They've got a pretty good young core group. Now, they're not all perfect and they've got a long ways to go and they're not all going to pan out as you hope they will, but I think they have an idea now of where they stand as far as that goes. Here's what they don't have. They do not have a first baseman or just a big-time slugger in the middle of the lineup. And I think that's going to be priority number one this winter. It may not be the super name at the top of the list, but they've got to go out and get somebody that's, beyond a Joey Gallo type of player where you're paying $5 million on somebody who had some success in the past, but has a lot of red flags. And, you're only committing to them for 1 year. I think they've got to go beyond that. And I think they know that. I think they need starting pitching help. You'd love for them to go after a big name ace, but it doesn't have to necessarily be that. You're essentially replacing Corbin. We know how much money he made. We know what kind of production they got for him. I think you are looking for somebody who probably doesn't cost as much as he does, but could provide a whole lot more for you and some stability and length and experience in the rotation. I think there's a chance at another bat. Again, they kind of don't really have a DH and they could play around with some different things. You may hear their name involved with some corner outfielders who could also DH, that kind of thing. That may be lesser on the priority list than first base. And I think they pretty clearly need to go get at least one, if not two, just solid setup men type relievers. Not necessarily a true closer, but somebody who can maybe step in and close if needed. Now, that doesn't have to cost a lot and they don't have to spend the fortune. That's really what we're talking about here. So, they are important pieces, but it's not like a huge commitment. And it's not like, oh man, they have so many needs that they have to fill. I think it's pretty calculated. And I think the way they approach this is going to be very telling about what their intentions are for 2025.
Of course, so much of this is what is Mike Rizzo allowed to do in terms of spending. It's not necessarily what he wants to do, it's what he is allowed to do by ownership. I think this is a big offseason in terms of figuring out exactly how in the Lerner ownership group is in terms of fielding a proper team when it comes to contending. The foundation of a good team, of course, is drafting and player development. The beauty of free agency is you can use it strategically, tactically. You can fill in those holes that are not being filled by drafting and player development for whatever reasons. The Nats are not going to make the postseason again without the players who they drafted and developed coming through. I think we all get that. Like, you're not going to just fix everything via free agency. It has to be that the James Woods, the Dylan Cruzes, the CJ Abramses, et cetera, end up being who they were brought here to be, or at least some proximity to what they were brought here to be. But obviously, you can upgrade yourself in free agency, and the Nats have done that in the past. And, we all know about Max Scherzer. I always come back, though, to someone like a Daniel Murphy. And, there's great irony in the Daniel Murphy signing, right? Because the initial target was Brandon Phillips. This gets forgotten, and that fell through. And the Nats, quote unquote, settled for Daniel Murphy, agreed with a contract with him right around Christmas time, if memory serves. And he ended up being outstanding for them. He was so good 2016, 2017, fell off in 2018, but especially those first two seasons, he was exemplary. The best offensive second baseman who has played in Washington, D.C., maybe ever, you'd really have to go back and research that, but he was awesome. And that wasn't necessarily by design. Like, again, he wasn't the primary target at that spot. The Nats paid him pennies on the dollar in terms of the production he provided. And he ended up being a really key piece for some really good, at least regular season Nats teams in 2016, 2017. So free agency can work in a great way. The idea is, do you make the right signings? Are you calculated and smart in what you do? What is unique about this offseason beyond where the Nats are is that this is a free agent class that, at least on paper, is one of the most appealing that we have had here. And you always got to be careful with that, right? But, you just look at the list. I mean, it's not just Juan Soto, Corbin Burnes, Max Fried, Willie Adames, Garrett Cole potentially, Alex Bregman, Blake Snell, Pete Alonso, Anthony Santander, Cody Bellinger, Christian Walker, Jack Flaherty. Like, the list goes on and on and on. So there's a lot to be looking at here. And we know that what tends to happen is that the contracts end up being beyond what anyone anticipated. But with so many significant names, do you think this maybe could be a buyer's market to an extent? Not necessarily for a Soto, but maybe once you get beyond the Juan Soto level of free agents this offseason.
Yeah, I do, because I think what you have to remember here is, okay, you're going to have however many teams are all in on the biggest name guys like Soto and Alonso in particular, I would say. But you're going to have that next grouping, sort of the consolation prizes, if you want to call it that, for those who don't sign those. The concern would be this, knowing how these things tend to work, especially when Scott Boras is involved. Very often, the whole market is held up waiting to see when the big fish is going to be landed. And that's obviously Soto. Well, if that drags on, and we're talking, January or even late January or approaching February before that happens, all those other free agents that are further down the list, are teams waiting on that? Or are they going to say, you know what, I'm not going to worry about Soto setting the market. I'm going to try to sign these other guys first. And I think that could be interesting, because those may be the types that the Nationals are ultimately most likely to land. Can they be aggressive to try to get somebody like that before the big fish are landed? Or are they kind of constrained by the way this free agency period plays out and have to wait for all those big names, which, while nerve-wracking, could pay off in the end, because maybe the other teams are spending a fortune on those guys, the big ticket items, and all of a sudden, a week or two before spring training, you have the ability to go sign a lesser player for a lot less money who could still really help you, as you described, like the Daniel Murphy situation, just maybe even later in the winter. I'll be curious to see how that part of it plays out. And like you said, there are a good number of them out there that you'd like to believe the Nats can get somebody from that whole list that can help them out, and maybe at a price that works for them.
The 1-0. Swinging a fly ball, well hit to left field. Way back goes this one. It's got a chance. It's going, and long gone up onto the railroad tracks. Welcome to the World Series, Juan Soto.
When it comes to the big fish, Juan Soto. So it's amazing, right? I mean, this is what has been built up for years now. This is why the Nats traded him in 2022. This is what has been talked about going back really to like 2020, 2021. Juan Soto's free agency, and we have arrived at that moment. Jon Heyman, MLB insider for the New York Post and MLB Network. He is notoriously close with Soto's agent, Scott Boras, so I don't think you have to think too hard about the sourcing for this report. But hours after the Dodgers won the World Series, Heyman reported that 8 teams checked in with Soto after the Yankees lost to the Dodgers in World Series Game 5 on Wednesday night. Heyman added by Thursday morning, the number of interested clubs was up to 11. It is unclear how many of those teams would meet Soto's asking price, but per Heyman, the asking price, $700 million or more. That would match the total value of the Shohei Ohtani contract with the Dodgers. But of course, so much of the money in the Ohtani contract is deferred. Soto is looking for a solid $700 million, according to Heyman. Now, you can almost see Scott Boras feeding Heyman all of these nuggets that were in that article. But, putting aside what went down in terms of how that report was put together, when you hear 8 teams checked in with Soto after the Yankees lost Game 5, by Thursday morning, the number of clubs was up to 11. Do you think that the Nats were one of those teams?
I don't know what checking in means, especially at that early stage of the game. I don't think there's any actual negotiations taking place at that point. It's perhaps just a hey, Scott, we'd like to be considered in the Soto Sweepstakes, something like that. I do believe the Nats are going to be involved in this to some extent. And if they're not, shame on them. They should. Now, I don't think that means that they deep down really believe, or anybody should believe, that they are a likely landing spot for Juan Soto. I think we've been saying here for a while now that once he was traded to the Yankees, provided that things went well there, it was hard to see a scenario in which he ends up leaving New York. And he wound up having a great season for them. He went to the World Series. I know they lost. I know there's a lot of frustration in the Bronx over how that series went, especially the struggles of Aaron Judge and others. But Soto did his part. Nobody's blaming him for them losing that series. And so in a lot of ways, I think that actually plays to their advantage to keeping him. They need Juan Soto. And they are extra motivated now to try to get back and ultimately win the World Series, something, let's remember, the Yankees have not done since 2009. So they're actually, by their standards, this is a real drought for them of 15 years. Every indication I got is that Juan Soto loved it there. Every indication I got is that the Yankees loved him. I know how this works. I know how Scott Boras works. He's going to create as much of a market as he possibly can. He's going to drag it out as long as he possibly can. The Mets are going to be all in on it for sure. They're going to say, hey, we can outspend anybody, even the Yankees, and Steve Cohen is going to try. I think the Phillies are going to be in on it to some extent. I think you'll see some other kind of big market teams thrown out there, like the Red Sox, maybe the Blue Jays, maybe the Giants. I know somebody tried to suggest the Dodgers could even be in on it. I don't know how that works exactly for them, but of course they would. I still believe deep down he's likely to stay on the East Coast. I think if you're the Nationals, you should try to stay involved in this thing, make him a real offer, and play up the idea of, hey, come home. This is a team that's ready to win. When we traded you, we were not going to be in a position to win by 2025, but now we think we are. If it's not this year, it's in the very near future. Come be the veteran leader of a team of a lot of young growing players that may have a chance to win for the length of your next contract, whatever that is. So I think they absolutely should do that. But deep down, I just feel like the way this is going to play out is this. Boras is going to play the market. He's going to get somebody to make a gargantuan offer, probably the Mets. And then he's going to go back to the Yankees and say, okay, are you willing to exceed this? And if I'm the Steinbrenner family, how can you let him walk? How can you be outbid by anybody, let alone the New York Mets? Especially if he wants to stay there. And my hunch is that that's his preference. So I do think he ultimately stays with the Yankees. But that doesn't mean the Nats shouldn't go legitimately in on this. Not just a token offer, but like make your pitch, go for it, just be realistic about it and understand that it's not entirely in your hands. They could even make what they think is the best offer. That doesn't guarantee anything because there's still the chance of the Yankees or somebody else making a better offer. And ultimately, Juan gets to decide where he's going to play.
I think it's so hard to see him not re-signing with the Yankees because when do the Yankees ever not keep someone who they truly want to keep? And who really can outspend the Yankees? I get the Steve Cohen factor, but the Yankees basically have unlimited financial resources when you look at Yes Network and the kind of revenue that the Yankees generate. And it's an odd deal when it comes to playing for the Yankees, right? Some guys completely wilt in that spotlight and some guys really thrive in it. And Juan Soto certainly seems to have thrived in it. He does not seem to be someone who doesn't like the spotlight. We used to talk about with Anthony Rendon, he doesn't really want the spotlight. Soto seems to relish the spotlight and thrive in the spotlight. And he had such a good season. Did well for the Yankees in some big spots. And so it's just so hard to see him leaving the Yankees. If somehow things went awry with the Yankees, I think there might be an opportunity for the Nationals. But at that point, the Nats would have to come correct because we get it. Soto's not going to sign with the Nats for $400 million. It's funny. When the Nats traded Soto and we had that article that came out from Jeff Passan of ESPN detailing the contractual offers that had been made by the Nats to Soto in the lead up to him being traded. And one of the things we talked about was how every offer was basically a day late and $1 short. You're talking about offers that were in the 400s. And now you have this Heyman report talking about Soto getting $700 million. Now, who knows if he gets that or not? But the point is, the price has only gone up. And so when it comes to coming correct in 2022 is not what coming correct in 2024 is, or 2025 if we get to that point. The price has only gone up. And so it's like, if somehow there is this opening for the Nats to bring Soto back, you can't dilly-dally. You can't do one of your deferral deals. You can't say, well, we'll give you $430 and last time we offered you $420. Like, no, you got to really come in hard. And it's just hard to see the Nats doing that, to say nothing of what we've talked about many times, which is, should you do that? Like, is any player worth that kind of money when you can instead spread out that money and address a variety of areas as opposed to just one guy? So, yeah, I think the Soto thing is a lot of fun. It would be awesome to have him back here and team him up with James Wood, Dylan Cruz, etc. But, you think about this logically, there are so many things that would have to fall in the Nats' favor. Things would have to go off the rails between Soto and the Yankees, and the Nats, i.e. the Lerners, would have to be willing to truly spend what it would take to get Soto, and we just don't know if that's going to be happening here. I think the point you bring up, though, about does Soto hold up the market is key, because we've seen that happen many times with these big-time free agencies, and I really hope that doesn't happen. And, you wonder if the Soto free agency, if the Nats feel like he's going to re-sign with the Yankees, if they just say the heck with it and they just go aggressively after other people, and they can maybe, cherry pick some guys who help them and maybe even get some favorable deals, as opposed to, I don't want to say wasting their time with Soto. But again, if it is this long shot, why get sucked into that and become a pawn in Scott Boris's game? Maybe the right tact for the Nats would be to go after, say, a Christian Walker or whoever else and be like, okay, that's who we want. Let's focus on that and not get sucked into the Soto sweepstakes, which we're probably not going to win anyway.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I think it tells you a lot about where they're really going here and what their intentions are. They could take a very aggressive approach here, say, here's what we need, let's go get that right away, as opposed to waiting it out, like you said, on a long shot of something else. Look, not that I wouldn't love to have Juan Soto back, who wouldn't, but you look at what the makeup of the team is right now, and there's a case to be made that that's not specifically what they need, and that signing him could prevent them from addressing the other needs that they're going to have, or maybe ultimately having a shot at re-signing one of their own now homegrown players. So, there's a lot involved in that. I want to go back to one thing that you said, though, about the 440 offer they made back in the day. This is why I always believed, and I think in a lot of cases, especially Boris clients, why they don't take those offers. Because they know the system is designed for them to make a lot more if they just wait it out. 440 at the time, everyone said, whoa, my God, that's a huge number. Even if it wasn't deferred, even if you just, didn't try to break it down into the details of it, just straight up $440 million at that time sounded like a gargantuan number. But Scott knew, and probably convinced Juan of this as well, that no, Wait it out. You will get more than that. The arbitration system raises your salary every year that you go through that. Other free agents are going to sign deals that raise the bar. And if you wait this out until the end and you become a free agent, you're going to get to pick wherever you want to go. And you're going to end up making way more money than that anyways. And you can like or dislike the way that system works. But that's the reason why these guys don't sign early. Now, yeah, you take a chance on maybe getting hurt or, your career doesn't quite pan out the way that it looks like it's going to. But for the really, really big name guys like that, it almost always benefits them in the long run to wait it out and become a free agent, and you end up getting paid more in the end. And one other thing, and I've been thinking about this myself, and it's something I may actually write as an article here in the next week or so. What if the Nats never traded him? Okay. He'd be a free agent right now. Well, let's say they decide to wait it out, say, no, we're going to try to hang on to him and hope that when the time comes, he wants to stay here and doesn't want to go somewhere else. Well, what would the state of the Nats be right now? They wouldn't have Abrams, they wouldn't have Gore, they wouldn't have Wood. Who knows who else they would have been able to acquire along the way. They wouldn't have won much of consequence, I don't think, the last few years. I don't think Soto alone was going to turn them back into a contender, especially when they had so many other holes on their roster. If you go through all that, you had him all the way through and he's been a national his whole career, and now he's finally ready for free agency. Is he going to want to re-sign here? Or is he going to say, hang on, there's greener pastures elsewhere? Not just in terms of money, but in terms of a team that has a better chance to win. So as painful as that was, and as much as we talked about at the time, I think their best hope ever of keeping Juan Soto long-term was to do exactly what they did. I think the wrench that was thrown into it all was the Padres trading him to the Yankees. If he had still been in San Diego, maybe there's a shot of him wanting to come home. But once he got to New York, I feel like that closed the window, not entirely, but pretty close to it.
Yeah, it is interesting looking back on the Soto trade. I think if you're a Nats fan and you can undo that trade, you wouldn't, because you got all of these promising pieces. I still don't think we're at that point to where we can definitively declare that like this great win for the Nats. Like, I think you still got to see what happens with Wood and Abrams and Gore and Susana, etc. But as things stand right now, if I said you could wave a magic wand and undo that trade, you wouldn't undo that trade. Of course, a big reason they made that trade was because their farm system was barren. And if their farm system had not been barren, then they wouldn't have had to make that trade. And I feel like that's an aspect of that trade that never gets brought up except on this podcast. Circumstances dictated that they almost had to make that trade because they sort of woke up and said, wait a minute, we're a really bad team and our farm system is like next to nothing right now. And so they made that trade. But right now, I don't think that you would undo that. Hey, Al Galdi here to tell you about the latest great offer from Window Nation for listeners of the Nats Chat podcast. An offer so good, it's the kind of offer that could get Juan Soto to come back to D.C. Here's what Window Nation has for you. 50% off all window styles plus 0% interest for 60 months. Call 866-90NATION or visit windownation.com. According to industry experts, the National Energy Assistance Directors Association, heating costs are going up again this winter, up to 23%. Protect yourself from increasing heating costs by getting yourself new, outstanding Window Nation windows. Window Nation is the best. You can get a free, no-obligation quote right now, and you can pay nothing until 2025 and get 0% interest for 5 full years, 60 months. 866-90NATION or windownation.com, and tell Window Nation that you want the deal that you heard about on the Nats Chat podcast. 866-90NATION or windownation.com, and make sure that you tell Window Nation that Al Galdi from the Nats Chat podcast sent you.
The 2-2. Swung on, hit high in the air to right field. Betts going back on the track. At the wall, she's gone. Oh, there's a Soto photo. He hits a high drive to deep right. Mookie went back, gave up, and the ball landed in deep right field for the tying home run. He's wonderful, marvelous. Juan Soto ties the game with a long home run.
So, we had the 2018-2019 free agencies of Bryce Harper and Manny Machado, which were built up like this Juan Soto free agency. And each free agency, talking about Harper's and Machado's, ended up being a disappointment. You know, you had all this hype, and those free agencies, for a variety of reasons, ended up lingering, ended up being almost boring. Like, they took a long time to find resolution. And it felt like, especially in the case of Harper, they weren't really pleased with how things played out. Like, it was this really anticlimactic ending to these free agencies that had been built up for years. Now, conversely, last offseason, we had the much-hyped Shohei Ohtani free agency, and I would say that that pretty much lived up to the hype, certainly when you look at the contract that he got. Do you think there's any chance that the Juan Soto free agency ends up like Harper's or Machado's as a quote-unquote disappointment, either in terms of the contract he gets or how long it takes? Or do you think that this is going to be more like Ohtani, where it's a massive number and he has many suitors and it's a really big deal, Soto being a free agent?
I think it's more likely to be that, the Ohtani type, than the Harper type. And the reason is, who are the teams that are most likely to be in on this? Go back to that winter with Harper and Machado. The Yankees really weren't in on it. The Dodgers were not in. I don't think the Cubs were really in at that time, who were like the big name, gotta go get them kind of teams. He ends up going to Philly, where I think we all felt like all along, I know it's worked out and he's happy there, but at the time it felt like he was settling a little bit, and that's maybe not really deep down where he wanted to go. But they were the only team, I believe, that was truly willing to offer him that kind of length of contract that he was seeking. He could have gone for like 3 or 4 years to the Dodgers, but he didn't want to do that. He didn't want to go through free agency. Again, remember the whole deal about he didn't get an opt-out in his deal. And Machado going to San Diego, at that time, that seemed like he's going where? The Padres? How did that happen? Now, again, it's kind of worked out. The Padres have turned into not a juggernaut, but a really good, consistent playoff team that has re-energized that city. And, you know, if they win Game 5 over the Dodgers, who knows how far they go? Maybe they're the ones having the parade right now. So it kind of worked out. But I think the difference right now is we know the Yankees are going to be in on Soto. We know the Mets are going to be in on Soto. I don't think the Dodgers will be, but again, maybe a couple others like the Phillies or the Giants or the Red Sox. So I think there's enough of the truly big name markets that desperately want Soto, who again just turned 26, that I believe this will be a legit sweepstakes for him, and he won't ultimately be settling for a number a lot less than we all think he's going to get. Now, one other thing about the contract, you're going to hear, whenever it happens, you're going to see this number that's thrown out there, and it may be a number that you're like, whoa, I can't believe that. Pay attention to a very important detail of it, I believe. The opt-out. I believe that it's going to have an opt-out after, say, year 4, 5, 6, somewhere in that range, because Scott knows he's only 26, Soto is right now. You have a chance to re-enter free agency at age 30, 31. Knowing how this system works, he's going to want to at least have that ability to do that. And so I think the total number may be misleading. I also think you're talking about probably a huge number of years, something in the range of 14 or 15 years. And that's why when you throw out the $700 million number, I absolutely think that's possible, because you break it down, say it's 15 years, 700 million. That's only, and I do only in air quotes, 46 million a year. That's not outrageous by today's standards, as ridiculous as that sounds. Ohtani was 10 years for 700. You extend it to 15 years, the average value each year is not nearly as high. So I do think it's possible that the big number is something like that, but I'd caution against caring too much about what that number is, because I think there's a great chance that they're going to have a mechanism in there for him to get out of it after 4, 5, 6 years and maybe re-up for even more money after that.
It's funny, these opt-outs are always seen as something that are favorable to players. I think they can be very favorable to clubs, because if you sign a free agent to massive money in his mid-20s and he opts out in his late 20s / early 30s, bon voyage, you know? I mean, like, you're letting the guy go at maybe the exact right time. Like, you get 4 or 5 really good years out of him, and then right as he's about to enter into his decline years, you let somebody else take him, pay him all this money, whereas you got the real prime years of the player. So I don't know. I feel like teams should embrace these opt-outs more than maybe they do. When the Nats signed Max Scherzer as a free agent in the 2014-2015 offseason, he was going into his age 30 season. Corbin Burnes is going into his age 30 season. Corbin Burnes, like Max Scherzer, track record of excellence in recent seasons, track record of durability in recent seasons. We know how much Mike Rizzo values starting pitching and still believes in the foundation of a winning club being starting pitching. Do you think the Nats will be in on Corbin Burnes, who we all know is going to be commanding massive money? Could you see the Nats diving back into the pool of giving a starting pitcher hundreds of millions of dollars?
I can see Mike Rizzo being interested in doing something like that. Again, we know what he values more than anything else on a baseball club, and that is dominant starting pitching. It's the way he has always believed is the best path towards a championship. It worked for him when he worked for the Diamondbacks. It obviously worked for him here with the Nationals. And he has not wavered from that belief. He's adapted in some ways as the years have gone on and understanding that there are other pieces to the puzzle. But deep down, he still believes that starting pitching and great starting pitching is ultimately your best path to a championship. So I think he would certainly be interested in doing something like that. I think the real question there is ownership willing to make that kind of commitment again to a starting pitcher? I think there's a different story when it comes to position players and pitchers when you're the Lerner family. And, it's unfortunate how it all played out. But the last two big contracts the Nats signed, you mentioned Corbin, but also Strasburg, who was retained, who had his opt-out and was able to do that at the perfect time coming out of a World Series and to turn that into a huge contract as well. The two contracts turned out to be disasters, as we know. Are the Lerners still shell-shocked from those, that they are worried about ever making that kind of offer again to a pitcher, especially one going into his 30s? Maybe Corbin Burnes is the exception. Maybe he is the Max Scherzer exception to it all and has a great Hall of Fame style career well into his 30s. But there's certainly more risk of that than of a Juan Soto or a Pete Alonso or an Alex Bregman breaking down like that and having that contract turn into a complete bust. So while I think Rizzo would certainly say, hey, I think this is somebody we should go after, whether it's Burnes or Max Fried even is another one to look at, I could see ownership being like, hang on, we're not entirely sure about that. I don't want to get burned again playing that game.
Yes, and you'd be going from one expensive guy named Corbin to another expensive guy named Corbin. Although in this case, this Corbin has a little bit of a better recent track record than the other Corbin. I think it's so tough. I think, and I've said this, if you never gave any starting pitcher a contract worth more than, say, $150 million, you would be right so more often than you would be wrong. Like, so many of these mega money contracts for starting pitchers do not work out. And so with Burnes, I would just be so reluctant because of what we just said. He's going into his 30s. At the same time, the profile does say that maybe he is one of those Max Scherzer exceptions, exceptionally durable and really good. Like, Burnes has been one of the best starting pitchers in the majors for a few years now. The other thing, too, I've wondered about, and we have seen teams try to do this. Of course, the player has to be willing to do this, but you overshoot on the AAV and the reward is the shorter term. So, like, what if the Nats went to Burnes and said, we will pay you $50 million for 3 seasons. We'll give you a 3-year, $150 million contract. Would Burnes be open to that? Is that something that the Lerners might be willing to do? So instead of having to give him $250, $300 million, they're giving him $150. They're just overpaying him essentially for 3 seasons.
I would absolutely do that. And I think teams should try to do that. And maybe they do. I could understand why, if you're Corbin Burnes or his agent, who, by the way, is Scott Boras, do you want to go back into free agency at age 33? And are you really going to now get, it's a calculation of what are you going to make in the long run over the length of your career? And does taking that deal now set you up to make more down the road, or does it actually set you up to make less down the road? And I could see why, from an agent standpoint, you don't prefer to do something like that. Now, if the entire market out there is saying we're too queasy to commit 4, 5, 6 years to a starting pitcher like that, nobody's going to offer more than that, then you might be able to convince them, hey, this is the best offer, go ahead and take it. It'll be interesting to see if anybody does go all in on a much longer deal. And traditionally, they do ultimately find that kind of contract, that kind of pitcher, maybe somebody lesser you could get for less. The other thing, I've been thinking about this for a while, and I think I brought it up on the show before. I think they're active in free agency in this regard, but I think specifically when it comes to pitching, there is a real chance they try to get it through a trade. They did this with Gio Gonzalez the last time they were in this position getting ready to win. They have a farm system now that has some depth to it, especially when it comes to outfielders, that if Mike Rizzo can say, hey, I've got multiple prospects who they may turn out to be great players, but we think those spots are filled. We have others already here who are going to take that, or even others in the minor leagues that we're not going to trade. You could put together a compelling package, perhaps for somebody who has a track record already, but might only have a couple more years of control, 2 or 3 years of control. I'd be really interested to see if they pursue that avenue. And I think that's a distinct possibility, especially if ownership is queasy about spending the big bucks on a starting pitcher.
Yeah, I mean, you think about someone like a Robert Hassel III, right? Like, even if he's doing well in the minors, what exactly is the path for him to the majors at this point? Now, there could be one. We'll see what happens with Jacob Young. But yeah, the Nats do seemingly have an abundance of outfield prospects who could be put together in a trade package.
Hi Nats fans, this is Tim Newmark, DC area composer, longtime Nationals fan, and proud composer of the Nats Chat podcast theme song. If you're enjoying the music and would like to hear more, check out timnewmark.com/streaming or just search for Tim Newmark wherever you listen to music. To find the rest of the song you're hearing now, search for the title Double in the Sun. Go Nats!
Fitting into the belt. The 1-2 pitch. Swing and a miss. He struck him out with a slider. And bang, zoom, a Curly W's in the books. The first win at home in 2024 for the Nationals as Kyle Finnegan comes on, strikes out 2 in the 9th inning, gets around the error, and the Nationals get a win for Trevor Williams as they defeat the Pirates to even this series.
So when it comes to the Nats' own free agents, Corbin, Williams, Barnes, and likely Gallo. So Corbin is gone. Gallo presumably gone. Williams and Barnes, more likely than unlikely to be re-signed. Would you not go that far? How do you view Williams and Barnes?
So with Trevor Williams, he did a tremendous job coming back this year from a terrible 2023 and completely reestablished himself as a quality big league pitcher. And even after suffering the flexor injury and missing like 3 months, came back at the end, and it was only 2 starts, but he looked like the same guy, and that positioned him extremely well going into the offseason. As we talked about at the end, I think there's value in having Trevor Williams on your staff next year, probably not as a full-time starter, or at best as a 5th starter, but maybe as that swing man, a role that he's held in the past. I think there's a compelling case if you're the Nationals to want to bring him back for something like that. The concern would be that he actually pitched too well this year, that there will be teams out there willing to give him an offer as a full-time starting pitcher. And if you're Trevor Williams, I think he prefers that and would probably take that. The sense I got at the end of the season, he was kind of saying his goodbyes. Reading between the lines, I kind of felt like he knew that he's probably not coming back. We'll see what the market is. I don't know for sure who's out there or how much they are interested in him. So I wouldn't rule it out 100%, but I feel like in a almost strange way, he may have pitched too well to be able to come back here for the role they'd probably envision for him. Jacob Barnes was kind of quietly a very good pickup for them on a minor league contract last year. Became kind of a workhorse for them, throw him into almost any role in their bullpen. He wasn't really part of the A bullpen, and I don't think they would view him that way, but they liked him. He was a good teammate. He did well for them. I don't know they'd commit more than $1 million or $2 million to him on a big league deal. And maybe they want to take their chances and see if they can get him or somebody else on a minor league deal. So I don't think that's a top priority. He's probably a guy that's not going to sign right away. He'll probably be sitting around most of the winter, and then the time comes, he's got to make a decision. I could see potential of him coming back, whether it's on a small major league deal or maybe even a minor league deal to come back and see if he can recapture what he did this past season.
Well, we will see. It is a fascinating time to be a Nationals fan because this could be a massive offseason. This could also be a very disappointing offseason. We just don't know. And, the circumstances of the offseason could maybe end up dictating what happens. In other words, if some guys' asking prices come down because the market is not favorable to them, then maybe that is an opportunity for the Nats to swoop in and make some signings that perhaps the learners would not have otherwise greenlit. So We shall see. We do want to send our best wishes to Pete Methurst, who we hear a lot on the Nationals radio network broadcast. He does some play-by-play. He hosts the post-game show quite a bit. Pete Methurst undergoing surgery for a brain tumor on Friday. Awful news, but we certainly hope that he's doing well. Pete also is someone who I've heard for years calling Navy football games, and with the season that Navy is having, I think it's been really cool to have a guy like Pete, who a lot of us know, be out there doing the games and calling really exciting Navy football games. It's been a while, been a few seasons anyway, since Navy was really good, but all the best to Pete and his family, and we certainly hope that he's doing well. Yeah, I've gotten to know Pete a little bit over the years. He's at the ballpark a lot, whether he's filling in for Dave Jagler on the radio or doing post-game show for them. This guy is a great broadcaster, really good at what he does in a variety of sports, and a good person on top of that. And so we are absolutely thinking of you, Pete, and everyone else who cares about him. And we very much look forward to seeing him again at the ballpark in the very near future. And so when it comes to like the now, the immediacy of, this week, next week, what are you sort of looking at here? Do you think that we'll start to see some movement, maybe with some, third, fourth tier free agents? Do you think it's still too early to be anticipating that? What's kind of your view as someone who covers the Nats here in terms of these next few weeks here? Yeah, traditionally they don't do a whole lot in November, so I'm not expecting a ton there. I think you're going to have more of the procedural stuff. They're going to decline their portion of the Gallo option that'll make him a free agent. As the month plays out, you have some other things you have to take care of, 40-man roster issues. You activate everybody off the 60-day IL. They're going to have to pare that down somewhat. You're going to have prospects who are eligible for the Rule 5 draft this year that have to be protected. And so some decisions there, which leads to some others on the 40-man roster getting dropped from it. You're going to have the non-tender deadline coming up before the end of the month. There are some players who I think could be in danger. Some guys who've had some real big league experience for them who may be set to earn a little more than they want to pay for the production they've gotten out of them. Guys who are out of options right now. I think that's what we're going to be looking at over the rest of this month. And then hopefully by December, as the winter meetings are approaching, we start to get some real movement. But as we said, it kind of depends on where the larger market goes. And I'm sure Mike Rizzo would love to be aggressive and go get what he knows he needs. But you are kind of constrained in a lot of ways by what the market is telling you. And if nobody else is signing guys, it's tough for you to go do that yourself. Yep. And as we have said, Mike Rizzo can only do what he is allowed to do from above. MLB's 2024 winter meetings happening in Dallas this year, December 9th through the 12th. Hit us up on X at Nats_chat. You can email the podcast. We always love hearing from you. natschatpodcast@gmail.com. We invite you to check out our website, natschatpodcast.com. We're coming to you sporadically during the Nationals offseason, as has been the case in recent years. So as developments warrant, as things emerge, we will be with you, and we appreciate you being with us on this podcast. So for Mark Zuckerman, I'm Al Galdi. We thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on the Nats Chat Podcast.
Verlander straight up as he takes signs, now into his wide. Here's the pitch. Soto swings and hits one high and deep to right. This is way back. Going, and gone. Goodbye. Into the second deck. A tremendous home run for Juan Soto. Bang! Zoom goes the magic wand. Juan Soto gives the Nationals the lead. Soto home runs the inning from Eaton and for Soto. Washington 3 and Houston 2.